So my name's Dr. Bruce Powell. I was an intensive care specialist, a head of department in Western Australia, state medical director for organ donation. Prior to that, I came over from the UK, ended up in Western Australia with my family, my fantastic wife and my two wonderful young boys. About 4 years ago, I was competing in a competition, a sort of 7,000 event riding challenge, and unfortunately during a long sort of steep downhill part of the ride, apparently there's a hairpin on the way down a very long descent, and I didn't see the hairpin and hit a lamppost at 65 kilometres an hour head on. I vividly remember the downhill and it starting to accelerate, and the road was quite bumpy and it was cold. I remember being cold, and I'm crouched down on the bike, and then suddenly there's a voice, someone saying, "Dad." And I remember opening my eyes, and it was my son. He was holding my hand, and I was apparently in an intensive care unit. And there's no join in there. There's no gap between going downhill and holding my son's hand. It's really strange. It's like a film, just changing scenes. My wife said you were sitting there looking at your identification tab, and you said to me, "I figured something out, you know." And my wife said, "Oh, what's that then?" I said, "I'm a patient, you know." And she said, "Yeah, no, you've been here for a week." And I always thought that was quite tragic, that there's me not having any idea that I've had a crash, you know, both my arms are broken and my neck's broken, all those things, and yet the only insight I have is that I might be a patient, you know. So I spent almost 4 months in hospital, coming up to 4 years, and the challenges that remain are those that might be familiar to others about memory and focus and fatigue, especially. You know, the first year I don't really remember. Thankfully, my wife is an extraordinary woman, very generous, very patient. She cared for me. Now that I've survived the crash, and I'm incredibly lucky to be as healthy as I am, with those challenges of the brain injury that lie with it, I had a whole plan to go back to work, and I actually started my back to work program. That was my aim. My aim was the recovery from the crash would be defined by me getting back to work. I think for a lot of us, what we do for a living is part of our identity, and I really struggled by losing that. I'll admit now that there were times when I would get onto the train, I didn't know where I was going. I was so tired. Cognitive fatigue is a whole new thing for me. I never got tired. I was the one who could do 80 hours a week, 12, 16 hours in theatre. And I had no strategies for dealing with fatigue, so I would just carry on until I was exhausted. Being fatigued meant that I was genuinely confused. I had no idea. So I got on the train and I didn't know where to get off. I didn't know really where I was. I remember feeling very disorientated and quite frightened by that, and I'd never had that before. And I realized that I was always pushing, always, you know, exams with hours, with time, my career, I was always pushing. With the brain injury, I can't do that. So I not only have to accept that I don't work in health anymore, I've also had to deal with changing my whole strategy, my whole working life. You know, as an intensive care doctor, a success for us is a patient leaving the unit. Really, that's when the battle starts. It's not when it finishes. I'm starting to think about being an advocate for brain injury. I think I'm in a truly unique position to have now been on both sides of the bed, as I say. You know, I think, and it's important that I make something of that. I've come to realise that each person's brain injury is incredibly personal and depends on the context and the injury, of course, and the follow-up. I think it's very important to not try to generalise too much about particularly one's experience of the brain injury. I think the single most important thing is that the greatest ally to us all is time. In other words, you have to be patient. It's hard to be patient when you're trying to rediscover your old self, but you have to be patient. And the same with carers. You have to have hope and you have to be patient.